The Xalzor Empire had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. Their war fleets crushed enemies without mercy. Their name alone made weaker species bow in fear. But now, something was wrong. A distress signal had come from the outer colonies. One of their strongest bases, Vale Prime, had gone silent. Grand Warlord Sirens stood in the massive war chamber, surrounded by high-ranking generals. A hologram flickered in front of them, showing the last message from Vale Prime. Static filled the air, and then a terrified voice spoke. "They are here. We can't stop them. They." The message cut off. The chamber was silent. Siron's red eyes narrowed. "Who attacked them?" he demanded. A young officer hesitated before answering. "Humans, Warlord." Laughter erupted in the room. The Xalzor had faced humans before. They were weaker, fewer in number, and technologically behind. How could they possibly destroy Vale Prime? "This must be a mistake," General Vorak scoffed. "Humans lack the power to challenge us." The warlord was not convinced. Something about the message felt different. "Send a fleet," Siron commanded. "I want this human threat erased." The Xalzor did not fear battle. They had conquered hundreds of species. Their warships could level planets in hours. No one had ever made them afraid. The fleet moved quickly, 30 powerful warships heading toward Vale Prime. Days passed, then weeks. No reports came back. No messages. Nothing. Siron grew impatient. "Where is my fleet?" Again, silence. A second fleet was sent, this time with spy drones ahead. They traveled carefully, scanning for signs of battle. Then they found them. Floating in the darkness of space were the remains of the first fleet. Ships broken apart, but no signs of an enemy attack. There were no blast marks, no energy signatures. It was as if the ships had been taken apart from the inside. Panic spread through the Xalzor command. This was impossible. How could humans do this? Then the first survivor was found. A single Xalzor soldier, floating in a damaged escape pod. He was barely alive. When brought onto the command ship, his eyes were wild with fear. His body trembled. "Tell you what happened?" an officer asked. The soldier looked around as if something unseen was watching. They came from nowhere. No alarms, no warnings. The humans, they were already inside our ships before we knew. And then they. He gasped, eyes widening in terror. "They took us." "Took you?" The officer pressed. "Who took you?" "The ghosts," the soldier whispered. Then his heart stopped. The room was silent again. Siron clenched his fists. This was no ordinary war. The humans were not fighting like before. They had become something different, something dangerous, and for the first time in Xalzor history, an empire that feared nothing felt the cold touch of fear. The Xalzor High Council gathered in the Grand War Chamber, a place where only the most powerful leaders of the empire spoke. The chamber was filled with whispers. A second fleet, one of their strongest, had vanished without a trace. There were no distress signals, no battle reports, just silence. Emperor Korgzan, the supreme ruler of the Xalzor, sat on his towering throne, his piercing gaze scanning the room. "Explain," he commanded. His voice was calm, but everyone could feel the threat beneath it. Grand Warlord Siron stepped forward. "We sent another fleet to investigate the destruction of Vale Prime." He paused. "We found nothing but debris, and one survivor." The room fell silent. Survivors were rare in war. The Xalzor either conquered or were destroyed. "What did the survivors say?" the Emperor asked. Siron hesitated. He claimed the humans were already inside their ships before the battle began. Laughter rippled through the chamber. The idea was absurd. No species could infiltrate a Xalzor war fleet undetected. Their security was unmatched, their technology superior. "This is nonsense," a counselor scoffed. "A soldier suffering from battle trauma. Humans cannot possibly." He died in terror before he could finish. Xiron interrupted. His last words were, "They took us." The room went cold. The Emperor's fingers tapped against the armrest of his throne. "You are suggesting the humans have weapons capable of bypassing our defenses completely." Xiron's eyes darkened. "I am suggesting we do not understand what the humans have become." The Emperor considered this for a moment. Then he turned to the Supreme Intelligence, the Talzor's vast AI system that processed all war strategies and probabilities. Analyzed the situation. The AI's cold voice filled the chamber. "Based on available data, the probability of human forces destroying 2 Xalzor fleets with conventional weaponry is statistically impossible." "Then how did they do it?" the Emperor demanded. "Unknown. But additional reports suggest a pattern." The AI projected a star map. 3 other Xalzor outposts have gone silent in the past solar cycle, all located in the same direction. "The humans are moving toward us." A shiver ran through the War Council. "Enough waiting," the Emperor declared. "Send our Omega fleet, 50 of our best warships. This ends now." The Xalzor moved swiftly. The Omega fleet, led by Admiral Jotor, was one of the most powerful armadas ever assembled. It traveled across space, reaching the outer colonies where the humans had last been seen. The fleet spread out, scanning for any sign of the enemy. Days passed. Nothing. Then, a distress signal. "This is Captain Vorkel. We are under attack." "I repeat, the enemy is." Static. The fleet rushed toward the signal, weapons armed, ready to destroy anything in sight. But when they arrived, nothing. Not even debris. Not even a single piece of metal to show that a battle had taken place. Admiral Jotor growled in frustration. "Impossible. There must be something here." The ship scanned every inch of space. The battlefield was empty. Then a whisper came through the communication channel, a voice that should not be there. "You are already dead." Every Xalzor officer froze. The lights on their ships flickered. Systems began shutting down. Weapons deactivated. And then they saw it. From the darkness of space, human ships emerge, silent, black as the void, moving without a sound. Jotor's heart pounded. There had been no warp signatures, no energy readings. It was as if the human fleet had been there the entire time, unseen, watching. "Fire," he roared. Nothing happened. Every Xalzor weapon system was offline. Their shields were failing. Their communications jammed. A human voice echoed through the Admiral's command deck. "We gave you a chance to stop." Jotor turned, eyes widening. The voice was coming from inside the ship. Alarms blared. Security teams rushed through the halls. But it was too late. The lights went out. One by one, Xalzor ships went dark. Their crews vanished. Not a single body remained. The Omega fleet was gone. Far away, on the Xalzor homeworld, a transmission appeared on the Emperor's screen. A simple message from the humans. "You started this war. Now, we finish it." The Emperor stared at the screen, his claws tightening against the armrest of his throne. The message from the humans lingered on the holographic display, simple yet terrifying in its finality. "You started this war. Now, we finish it." The chamber was silent. Not a single member of the High Council spoke. The Omega fleet, their strongest armada, had been erased. No wreckage, no survivors, nothing to analyze. It was as if 50 warships had been swallowed by the void itself. The Emperor turned to the Supreme Intelligence, his voice cold and controlled. "Explain." The AI's voice responded without emotion. "Tactical analysis inconclusive. No recorded energy signatures. No identifiable human weapon systems detected. Probability of human technological advancement exceeding Xalzor projections, 98.7%. The Emperor's eyes burned with rage. "Are you telling me we do not understand how they fight?" "Affirmative." This was unacceptable. that Kal-Zor had ruled the stars for millennia. Their empire had expanded without resistance. Civilizations bent the knee or were crushed beneath their fleets. Never before had they faced an enemy they could not see. Grand Warlord Siron finally spoke, his voice quieter than usual. We have underestimated them. Humans have become something different. The Emperor clenched his jaw. Then we escalate. His hand moved across his throne's command panel, activating the war beacon. The massive signal pulsed across the Empire, summoning their entire military force. Thousands of warships, millions of soldiers. The full might of the Kal-Zor would descend upon the humans, and this humiliation would end. But then something unexpected happened. The war beacon did not activate. A moment of confusion passed through the war chamber. The beacon had been their greatest strength, allowing instant coordination across their entire empire. For it to fail was impossible. The Supreme Intelligence processed for a few seconds, then reported the impossible. War beacon compromised. Command signals blocked. Military forces unable to mobilize. The Emperor's eyes widened. Who has done this? A new voice crackled through the Imperial communication systems. A voice that did not belong. A voice that should not be there. You still believe you are in control. The chamber froze. It was a human voice. Impossible. The Imperial communication network was the most secure system in the galaxy. No species had ever breached it. Yet here was a human, speaking directly to the Emperor himself. Who are you? The Emperor growled. The voice was calm. Too calm. We warned you. You did not listen. The chamber's massive screens flickered. The lights dimmed. Then, one by one, the council members began to disappear. The Emperor watched in horror as each Kal-Zor around him flickered, their bodies turning to static before vanishing completely. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't teleportation. It was as if they had never existed. Stop this, the Emperor roared, slamming his fist against the command panel. But nothing responded. His empire's most advanced technology had turned against him. The Supreme Intelligence spoke again, but now its voice sounded wrong, corrupted, distorted, system integrity compromised. Kal-Zor command structure erased. Erased. The Emperor's claws dug into his throne. No, this is a trick. A lie. You still do not understand, the human voice continued. This war ended before you even knew it had begun. The Emperor's mind raced. How? How had the humans done this? They were a young species, barely a fraction of the Kal-Zor's age. Their technology was supposed to be inferior. But now, their war fleets were gone, their command systems disabled. Even their High Council was vanishing before his eyes. The Emperor's body tensed as realization sank in. The humans had not simply fought back. They had rewritten the rules of war. The voice spoke once more, its tone final. Your empire is already dead. You just haven't accepted it yet. And then, the Emperor was alone. The Emperor sat motionless in his vast throne room, the silence stretching endlessly around him. The war chamber, once filled with the most powerful Kal-Zor leaders, was now empty. No council, no warlords, no supreme intelligence. For the first time in his reign, he felt something foreign, something he had forced upon others, but never experienced himself. Isolation. He tapped his command panel. Nothing. The Imperial network was dead. His ships, his soldiers, his empire, all disconnected. It was as if the Kal-Zor had never ruled the stars at all. He rose from his throne, his mind racing. This could not be happening. The Kal-Zor were conquerors. They were eternal. They could not simply be erased. And yet, the humans had done exactly that. His rage burned, but underneath it, a shadow of fear lurked. How had they done this? Not with brute force, not with superior fleets, but with something far worse. Something unseen. A whisper broke the silence. Not from a speaker, not from his command systems. It was simply, there. You are still alive because we allow it. The Emperor turned sharply, but there was no one there. His breathing deepened. His claws curled into fists. This was impossible. The Xal-Zor knew war. They understood battle, power, and strategy. But this was something else. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of movement. A flicker of light, a shifting shadow, a presence at the edge of his vision. He turned, claws ready. The throne room, once brightly lit, was now dim. Too dim. The massive structure, made of cold black stone, seemed smaller, like the darkness was consuming it. And then he saw them. Figures standing in the shadows, silent, motionless, watching. They were human, but they were not soldiers, not in armor, not armed with weapons, just standing there. His voice came out like a growl. You think you can intimidate me? They did not answer. They did not move. They just watched. A cold realization slithered into his mind. They had been here the whole time. The Emperor moved toward them, ready to strike. They vanished. Not teleported. Not ran. They simply ceased to exist. He spun around, and now they were behind him. More of them. Silent. Observing. For the first time in his long life, the Emperor felt something new. He felt hunted. His empire had fought wars for centuries, conquered species, destroyed civilizations, and yet these humans, these creatures, were not fighting back. They were erasing history. The Emperor roared, his voice shaking the throne room. Face me. But they did not. Instead, his throne disappeared. The massive structure, the seat of his power, was gone. The floor where it had stood was smooth, untouched, as if it had never been built at all. His breathing quickened. His claws clenched. He turned to his last remaining escape, a direct transmission to the war fleet stationed in the capital. But when he tried to send the command, he received an answer he never expected. There is no fleet. His mind recoiled. That was impossible. The capital fleet was 500 warships strong. They were the last defense of the Xal-Zor homeworld. But the screen in front of him showed nothing. No signals. No ships. No evidence that they had ever existed. He whispered the words, as if saying them would make them real. Where are my fleets? The voice returned. Calm. Cold. Absolute. You do not understand. The Emperor's breath was heavy. He could feel the truth slipping through his claws like sand. This was never a war. The shadows in the room grew darker. The humans, silent, watching, stepped forward. Not menacingly, not as warriors, as something else. You thought we would fight you with fleets, the voice continued, with weapons, with soldiers. You believed we would challenge you in battle. A pause. You were wrong. The Emperor tried to step back, but there was nowhere to go. We did not come to defeat you. The whisper was close now, almost inside his mind. We came to erase you. The Emperor's body trembled. The throne was gone. The war fleets were gone. Even his war council, his entire command structure, had been erased. It wasn't just his power. It was his history. His empire had existed for thousands of years, but now it was vanishing. He looked down at his own claws. They were fading. His voice cracked, filled with something he had never allowed himself to feel. Terror. You can't. The whisper was the last thing he heard. We already have. And then the Emperor of the Xal-Zor ceased to exist. The Xal-Zor homeworld floated in the void, silent and still. Where once there had been the heart of a vast empire, now only darkness remained. No ships patrolled the skies. No lights flickered across the towering cities. The streets were empty, the grand halls abandoned. Yet this was not destruction. There had been no war, no explosions, no battle scars. The world had simply stopped. In the capital, a lone figure moved through the silent ruins. Supreme General Vorkesh, one of the last surviving commanders of the Xalzor military, staggered through the empty streets. His breathing was heavy, his mind racing. Where was everyone? The streets had once been filled with billions of Xalzor citizens, their voices filling the air, their presence dominating every inch of the city. But now, the great capital, an empire's pride, was lifeless. He stepped over fallen banners, their once proud insignia faded and worn. Statues of past rulers stood untouched, yet the names carved into them were gone. The words had been erased, as if history itself had started to unravel. Emperor Korgzan, Vorkesh whispered, activating his personal communicator. Do you read me? Static. He tried again, reaching out to the war fleets, to anyone. Nothing. His claws tightened. This was not possible. The Xalzor Empire spanned hundreds of worlds, thousands of fleets. It could not just disappear. But the truth was already sinking in. Something had changed, something beyond understanding. And the humans, those primitive creatures, were at the center of it. He reached the grand palace, its gates wide open. The throne room loomed ahead, cold and dark. The place where the emperor once sat was empty. The massive throne was no longer there. The walls were bare, as if the empire had never ruled from this place. Vorkesh's breath quickened. He had fought 100 wars. He had seen planets burn, entire species crushed beneath the Xalzor's might. He had never feared anything. Until now. A whisper came from the shadows. A voice, calm and cold. You are the last. Vorkesh spun, drawing his weapon. Who's there? Silence. Then they stepped forward. Humans. Not soldiers, not warriors, just standing there. They had no weapons, no armor, nothing that should have made them a threat. Yet the air around them was wrong. You do not understand what we have become, one of them said. Vorkesh tightened his grip on his blaster. You are nothing but. Do not finish that sentence, the human interrupted. His voice carried no anger, no arrogance, just certainty. Your people said the same thing before. And now, they are gone. Vorkesh felt something cold grip his chest. Where is the emperor? He demanded. The human tilted his head. Who? The general's claws trembled. The emperor's name. His name was. His mind struggled, reaching for the memory. But the more he tried to grasp it, the further it slipped away. His heart pounded. This is not possible. We told you this was never a war, the human continued. We do not fight as you do. We do not battle for conquest or glory. The human took a step forward. We do not need to destroy. Vorkesh stumbled back. He tried to call for reinforcements, tried to reach out to the fleet, but his communicator, his weapons, his very sense of control, all of it was slipping through his claws. The human's eyes locked onto his. We erase. The city behind them began to fade. The towering buildings, the streets, the monuments, everything dissolved into nothingness. And then, Vorkesh felt it. Something pulling at him. His own body. His arms, his legs, fading. The tips of his claws blurred, his armor vanishing piece by piece. Stop, he choked. You can't. The human watched him, his face unreadable. You believe power was measured in warships, in weapons, in fire and blood. Vorkesh fell to his knees as his vision darkened. His breath came in short gasps. His existence was slipping away. You were wrong. The last thing he saw was the human standing over him, calm, unmoving. And then, Vorkesh was gone. The stars above the Xalzor homeworld shone as they always had, cold and distant, indifferent to the fate of those below. But the planet itself, the once mighty heart of an empire, was now nothing more than a husk, a forgotten relic in the vast emptiness of space. No war had been waged here, no invasion, no battle cries or fallen warriors. The empire had not been conquered. It had been erased. Across the void, the last remnants of the Xalzor military, scattered ships, isolated bases, remnants of once mighty fleets, were beginning to understand what had happened. They sent messages. No one answered. They scanned the Empire's core worlds. Nothing was there. It was not destruction, not devastation. It was as if those planets, those cities, those people had never existed at all. Admiral Korath, commanding one of the last Xalzor warships, stood in his command chamber, his eyes locked on the empty screen before him. His claws gripped the edges of the console so tightly that the metal bent beneath his fingers. "Run the scans again," he ordered, though his voice betrayed the fear in his heart. His officers hesitated, then obeyed. The scanners swept through the void, searching for any sign of the Empire, any trace of the fleets that had once controlled this sector. The results were the same. Nothing. Korath exhaled slowly, his chest rising and falling in measured breaths. "Explain," he commanded, his voice dangerously low. One of his officers swallowed hard. "Sir, the Empire's records are missing. The archives, the communication logs, the star maps, everything has been wiped." "Impossible," Korath growled. "The archives are stored in multiple locations. Even if the homeworld was lost, we would still have." The officer hesitated. "Sir, it's not just the archives." He paused, then forced himself to say the words. "It's as if the Empire was never there to begin with." Korath's blood ran cold. No, this was not possible. The Xalzor had ruled for centuries. They had conquered countless worlds. Their empire had stretched across the stars. And now they were being told that it was all gone. Not just their fleets, not just their worlds. Their very existence. Korath's eyes burned with fury. Who did this? The answer was one he already knew. The humans. The species they had mocked. The species they had dismissed as weak. The species they had attacked first. "Contact the surviving fleets," he ordered. "We need to regroup, find the others, prepare for—" "Sir," another officer interrupted, voice shaking. "The fleet, it's shrinking." Korath turned sharply. "What?" The officer was pale. He motioned toward the holographic display, showing the Xalzor's remaining fleet. The numbers were decreasing. Not from combat. Not from destruction. The ships were simply vanishing. Before their eyes, one of their battleships, one of the few remaining, blinked out of existence. No explosion. No sign of attack. One moment, it was there. The next, it wasn't. Korath's breath quickened. This was beyond warfare, beyond strategy. The humans were not fighting them. They were removing them. A whisper echoed through the ship's systems, a voice that should not have been there. "You should not be here." Korath's claws tensed. He turned toward the main screen. "Who are you?" The whisper did not answer. Instead, more ships vanished. Entire squadrons gone. Korath could feel it now, the pull of something unseen, something ancient and terrifying. It was not a weapon, not a fleet. It was correction. The universe itself was rewriting. And the Xalzor were being removed. Korath's officers screamed as their bodies began to blur. Their forms flickered, like images on a dying screen. One by one, they disappeared. Korath fought against it, his mind refusing to accept what was happening. He reached for the control panel, for something, anything that could stop this. But his own claws were fading. The whisper returned, final and absolute. "You were never meant to rule." Korath opened his mouth to scream. And then he was gone. The void where the Xalzor Empire once stood was now silent. Their fleets, their worlds, their rulers, all had faded into nothing. No wreckage, no ruins, no history. The universe had moved on, as if they had never existed at all. But the humans remained. A single vessel drifted through the emptiness, small and unassuming. Inside, a lone figure sat at the center of a vast control chamber, surrounded by glowing screens filled with unreadable symbols. The man's face was calm, his eyes focused as he observed the remnants of what once was, or rather, what had been erased. Final confirmation, a voice echoed through the chamber. It was not spoken aloud but transmitted directly into his mind. The correction is complete. There are no remaining traces. The man leaned back in his chair. He was not a soldier, not a warlord. He had never fired a weapon, never led an army. And yet, the entire Xalzor species had fallen before him. "Understood," he replied. His voice was steady, without emotion. "Proceed with the final sweep." The screens flickered, displaying the last remnants of Xalzor data, bits of scattered information still clinging to the fabric of reality. Their war plans, their genetic records, their culture. The last echoes of their existence. The man studied them for a moment. Then, with a single motion, he deleted them. The screens dimmed. The last traces of the Xalzor faded into nothing. It was done. A new voice emerged from the silence, this one deeper, filled with quiet authority. "It is always the same," it said. "They see our worlds, our people. They believe we are like them. They think they understand power." The man did not respond. He simply watched the void, where once an empire had stood. "They think war is about weapons, about fleets and soldiers," the voice continued. "They never comprehend the true nature of control." The man finally spoke. "And now, they never will." A quiet hum filled the chamber as the ship's systems adjusted. Across the galaxy, subtle changes were taking place. Star charts realigning. Historical records rewriting. The great empire that had once spanned the void no longer existed, not just in the present, but in memory itself. There would be no legends of the Xalzor, no warnings in ancient texts, no hidden survivors. They had not been defeated. They had been forgotten. The man's gaze turned toward a distant star. Somewhere, on a world untouched by war, humanity continued its quiet existence. They built, they learned, they expanded, they watched, they waited. He did not know when the next civilization would rise, or when the next empire would challenge them. But he knew one thing. When the time came, humanity would be ready, and history would forget them too.